Grandpa was born on October 30th, 1945. He and my grandma were the closest thing I had to real parents, and I'm grateful to have had them. My dad was never anything more than a name on a birth certificate, and my mom was in an accident just after I was born. I've lived with my grandparents since I was 8 months old, and I learned so much from them. Grandma taught me to take care of myself, to cook and clean, and how to be responsible for a household. From Granddad, I learned, too many things to list. He taught me to hunt, to fish, to manage my money, to pay my debts, how to be a man. As I said, that's a lot to put on a short description, but Grandpa was a great man. He shared everything with me, the two of us being incredibly close. But I recently found out that he held on to one little secret. The secret to his long life. Something I learned on the day that he died. Grandpa always celebrated his birthday in the same way. He would sit on the porch with Grandma, both of them in costume, and pass out candy to trick-or-treaters. Grandpa loved Halloween, always wore a costume, and bought the best candy for the scores of kids that came to the farm. Grandpa was known for his corn mazes, spooky decorations, and the best candy in town. I've always helped with the festivities throughout my childhood, and despite all the smiling kids and happy adults, Grandpa always had the biggest grin on his face. As the porch lights started going off, and the kids started heading home, Grandma would light the candles, and we would sing to Grandpa as he sat smiling at the small pile of candles smoldering on top of his cake. In the candlelight, his face always seemed more lined and seamed than it normally did. Granddad had looked 40 well into his 60s, but he looked about 100 in the light of all those candles. After he blew them out, Grandma would cut pieces off the double chocolate cake, and Grandpa would savor every bite like it might be his last. I asked him about it once, and he just laughed and said that one day I'd understand. Then he'd check his watch, 9:55 on the dot, and he'd excuse himself to go set up in his music room. Calling it a music room doesn't really capture its grandeur. Grandpa, back in his day, was a country music star of sorts. He played on the Grand Ole Opry, joined the band with the Presley Jamboree, and he'd opened for Johnny Cash in his heyday. The room was full of pictures of him playing with everyone from Merle Haggard to Conway Twitty, and his guitar collection was awe-inspiring. Granddad spent a lot of time there, as I remember, and he often wrote songs for artists and recording companies. He would sit there on his birthday, however, and play the same old guitar every time. It was a battered old acoustic, the lacquered white body peeling and ratty, the strings worn to the point of unraveling, and the neck seemed chipped beyond repair. Despite this, it was one of Grandpa's favorites, and he picked it often when he was alone. Despite this, he always looked so thoughtful when he played, like it reminded him of something he'd rather forget. Grandpa would sit in there and practice for a little while, and then, at exactly 10:30, he would call me in, kiss my forehead, and tell me to get to bed. I would always stay up on Grandpa's birthday, even if I had school the next day. At 10:30, though, I would go to bed, and I would always listen to the music from the room as Grandpa played. When I was little, I just listened from my bed, the words making me feel weird. Granddad's voice was smooth, ageless, and I sometimes thought that it must be a younger man who was singing with Granddad. In the beginning, I did think I heard a second voice, but I always put it aside as my ears playing tricks on me. Well, what is this I can't see with ice cold hands getting hold of me? Well, I am death, none can excel. Open the door to heaven or hell. I was 6 the first time I snuck out to listen to Granddad. I was so scared, not because I was breaking the rules, but because it was so dark in the hallway. Granddad had one of those old character lamps, Woody Woodpecker, I think, and the bulb was old and yellow. It made a little island of light, a reprieve in the darkness, and I had to walk through the darkness with something like real terror creeping up my throat. I didn't want to go, not at first, but the music seemed to pull me. The closer I got to the door, the closer it all became. I could hear Grandpa's voice oozing from beneath the door, and it enticed me right up to the lock. Oh, death, oh, death, won't you spare me over to another year? I knew there was definitely a second voice singing, something low and gravelly, and it oddly harmonized with Grandpa's silky tones. That old guitar, the one with the bone-white body, jangled on the fourth key as the tuner loosened in that slow, careful way that it does. Even this didn't sound at odds with the song. It all came together like a dying body singing its final notes. Granddad played, the stranger singing harmony with him, and I leaned against the door as I listened to them. "Oh, death, someone would pray, could you wait to call me just another day? The children prayed, the preacher preached, time and mercy are out of your reach." I left before the song was over, climbing into bed and covering up as Granddad finished playing and went to bed himself. I never heard his guest leave, just Grandpa sharing a few quiet words before leaving his music room and heading to bed. Even at 6, I knew that was weird, but I didn't think much of it. I was young, and my brain was involved in other matters, like Ninja Turtles and the third Mario game. I guess that was when I started paying attention to Granddad's yearly ritual. I was young, so it was only precursory at best. I noticed Granddad pass out candy, run the yearly carnival, eat his cake, and then retire to his music room. After I'd gone to bed, he would play that song, his strange guest singing along, and I would sit at the door and listen. It was always the same song, the mournful tone that made my skin prickle. The voice singing with him was part of it, I realized. But I didn't know exactly what I was hearing until much later. I just assumed that he had some friend who came over late to celebrate his birthday, with some songs and maybe a few drinks. "I'll fix your feet till you can't walk, lock your jaw so you can't talk, close your eyes so you can't see, this very hour come and go with me." The way the guitar shivered in his hand as his dexterous fingers rang the sounds from the strings was magical. I'd seen his fingers grow thicker and thicker as the arthritis took the mobility from his hands, but it never seemed to extend to his playing. On nights like tonight, though, it was like having my grandfather play in his 20s again. His nimble fingers playing on the aging guitar were ghostly, and I became more scared of the music than anything in the hallway. "I have come to take your soul, leave the body and leave it cold, to drop the flesh from off the frame, earth and worms will have their claim." I was 12 when I asked him about the strange jam sessions he had. I was eating eggs and grits at the table, the school bus still an hour away, and the yawn that interrupted my eating made Grandpa chuckle as he entered the kitchen. "Stay up too late reading your funny books again?" Grandpa asked, shaking out his newspaper. He'd been awake since the sun's edges graced the sky, and his hands were already gray with soil. Granddad's father had been a farmer, just like his father before him. Granddad had kept the tradition alive, despite not needing to. Granddad hadn't been foolish with his money like some of his contemporaries had been. He had bought land, invested in things that lasted, and now in his old age, he rested on his laurels. "Nah," I said, deciding to ask the question that had been bugging me for years. "I guess I heard you playing last night and just couldn't get to sleep." Grandpa hummed from behind his paper, but I could tell that the question was something he was considering. It was November 1st, and Grandpa had gone through his usual routine last night, complete with jam session. I had lingered outside the door, my hand on the knob as I listened, and I had only just slipped back in my room when he came out. The whole time he played, I had thought about just throwing the door open and seeing who was singing with him, but the idea seemed tantamount to walking in on Gramps while he was in the shower. Plus, hell, there was something about the person singing with him that scared me a little. I couldn't put my finger on it, but that was not a man to be crept up on. "Who do you play with every year, Gramps?" I asked, keeping eye contact with the back of his paper as he hid behind it. "I never see them leave, but I know I've heard them." Grandpa was quiet for a little while, long enough for me to think that he wouldn't answer. "It's an old friend, kiddo." I took a few more bites as I waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. Grandma put some breakfast down in front of him, and Grandpa folded his paper and began to eat. I watched the eggs and bacon being forked into his mouth, giving him a moment before plunging onward. Grandpa didn't like being prodded, especially when he was eating, but I needed some answers. So who are they? I've never seen them come in or even leave after. You don't need to know. It's none of your business, kiddo, so don't be nosy. My curiosity was piqued, but Grandpa had made it pretty clear that the subject was closed. It wouldn't do any good to argue once his mind was made up either, but that wouldn't stop me from continuing my investigation. I asked Grandma about it, but she wouldn't tell me much either. It's something your grandpa's done since he was young. He told me after we were married that it was something he had to do once a year and that I couldn't bother him while he was doing it. The consequences would be dire, is all he would say when I asked him why. When I asked her why he did it at night, she told me that Grandpa had said that he was born at night. He was born at 10:46 on Halloween. He says that has something to do with it, but he's never told me more than that, and I've never asked. Your grandfather is a heck of a man, but business is business. You might not like what you find if you go poking around either, kiddo. I didn't fully understand at 12, but it made me hungry to know more. Oh, death, whoa, death, won't you spare me over till another year? I spent the next 10 years crouching outside the door, listening to the song. I'd learned the song, it was an old one, and Grandpa played it better than anyone I'd ever heard. Grandpa played it as though he was busking to buy daily bread. He put his heart and soul into every word, which somehow changed the words. It was something I looked forward to every year, and part of the reason I asked Grandpa to teach me how to play in the first place. My mother came to my bed, placed a cold towel upon my head. My head is warm, my feet are cold, death's a moving upon my soul. Grandpa was thrilled when I asked him to teach me. I was 13 and I wanted to know how to make music like him. He told me not to get too ahead of myself, but agreed to teach me after school. He was pretty clear that my schooling had to come first, but he was more than happy to teach me the chords and some techniques. We practiced after school every day, Grandpa taking me through the basics with ease. I took to it pretty quick, Grandpa saying I must have gotten the knack from him, and pretty soon I was playing the usual teenage standbys. Grandpa rolled his eyes as I played Wonderwall and Chop Suey, playing along as I powered through Bridge Over Troubled Waters or House of the Rising Sun. Grandpa taught me some of the old shit-kicking tunes he used to cut his teeth on at the honky-tonks, and soon I was playing along with most of what he threw at me. It wasn't until I picked at the first few chords to the song I'd heard him play on his birthday that he covered my hand and stopped me. Not that song, kid. Never play that song. That song is... I only play that song once a year, and never until then. Oh, death, how you treating me? Closed my eyes so I can't see. Well, you're hurting my body, you make me cold. You run my life right out of my soul. Grandpa and I played every chance we got, and as the years proceeded, I found I liked playing music with him. I always played for fun, though. I never made it more than something to impress girls at a bonfire, or wow my friends at the talent show. By 16, I knew what I wanted to do with my life. Music was fun, but I loved discovering how things worked. Machines were my passion, but I loved taking anything apart and discovering how it functioned. Granddad supported my plans to go to college after high school, and for graduation, he presented me with a beautiful acoustic guitar. So you don't forget to have fun while you're working your ass off, kiddo. Oh, death, consider my age. Please don't take me at this stage. My wealth is all at your command. If only you'll move your ice-cold hand. Tonight, Grandpa celebrated his 75th birthday in the same way he always did. He dressed as Old MacDonald, Grandma as Mrs. MacDonald, in a long flowery dress, and they handed out candy to cowboys and aliens and various superheroes. I've been living with them while I attend college, and as the kids left and the floodlights went out for the night, I slid the comically large cow head off and joined my grandparents on the porch. Grandma had a double chocolate cake alight with 75 burning candles. As we ate our cake, I couldn't help but notice that Grandpa looked a little different tonight. Not sad, but speculative. Like this might be the last piece of Grandma's cake he ever ate. When I got up to take my plate to the kitchen, Grandpa put a hand on my arm and asked Grandma if she would mind taking my plate too. She said not a bit, and took all 3 plates to the kitchen so she could wash up. Grandpa looked at me, his face asking the question before his mouth, and it was the question I'd been waiting to hear my whole life. Would you like to come and play with me tonight? I was speechless. How long had I waited for just that very thing? I nodded at him and followed him to the music room with excitement and apprehension. I was finally going to get to meet Grandpa's mysterious guest, the one I'd heard singing for so many years. I remembered the way that touching the doorknob had made me feel, and wondered if I could even play in his presence. Oh, the young, the rich, the poor, all alike to me you know. No wealth, no land, silver or gold, nothing satisfies but your soul. He was waiting for us when we came into the studio. He was, well, there was no way to describe him. He was tall, not height-wise, but more long than tall, I guess. His fingers were especially long, and I wondered if he played guitar too. He was dressed in white, his pristine suit complete with a bolo tie, and his hat was a tall 10-gallon that made him look like a rancher on a western. His face gave me the willies, though. He looked like someone had stretched a very believable flesh mask over a cow skull. The bones in his cheeks poked out oddly. His ears were long and curved in strange ways. His eyes were hollow, like a skull, and looking at him made me a little ill. Who was this guy? How did he know my granddad? He must be important if Granddad would spend his birthday evening with him every year.
Ah, Ramon. Good to see you.
Azzy, Granddad said, taking his guitar off the wall. Long time no see.
365 days to be exact. So you play for me tonight?
Grandpa looked at the guitar, the bone-white body looking odd against his tan skin, and smiled as he walked towards me. Nope, my grandson is. He pushed the guitar into my hand and took a seat beside me. The guitar felt strange, like nothing I'd ever held before. The neck felt porous, almost like driftwood, and the body was coarse against my skin. There was a smell to it, something like moldy wood, and I realized I had never actually played this guitar before. Grandpa played it sometimes, but other than the nights like this, he didn't seem to want to touch it. The stranger looked at me expectantly, and as I strummed the chords, I could only think of one song I wanted to play. The song I had heard so many times spilling out from under that door, spilled from my own mouth like he had gutted me. The words bubbled out as I sang for death's reprieve, for death's abatement, and as I sang, I felt the stranger watching me. Though my call was to death, it felt as if this stranger were the one I was truly singing to. I felt like his eyes were boring into me, seeing my worth, and as the song came to a close, he clapped his hands together in mock good cheer. His hands coming together sounded like bones rattling in a crypt.
Well done, kid. You got chops. Maybe not chops as big as your grandpa here, but chops. Take it this means our deal's at an end, Ramon?
Granddad nodded, reaching for the guitar and nodding to me. Head to bed, kid. Azzy and I have some business to discuss. I told him I'd see him tomorrow, but I doubted him when he said he was sure he would. I wept as I lay in bed, not knowing why. Grandma woke me up the next morning. She was crying, her words slurred as she told me that Grandpa was in his music room. He had passed in the chair that he always sat in when he played music. The doctors said it had been a heart attack, that he likely hadn't suffered. I hadn't needed him to tell me that. When I came across Grandpa in his music room, he had the most satisfied smile on his face. That white guitar was laying across his lap, and when I picked it up, I put it away, the touch of it making my skin crawl. I was kind of numb through the funeral, unable to come to terms with what I'd seen. Had that man, the one that Grandpa had called Azzy, been responsible for his death? How had he given Grandpa a heart attack? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made, but I felt like he had something to do with all of this. Grandpa's note, however, brought it all into perspective. Grandpa left me his music room in his will. All the guitars were mine, all the awards, all the music memorabilia, a binder of songs that he hadn't sold yet. It was a generous gift, given on the grounds that I stay in school and help Grandma keep the house up. The house would be mine after Grandma was gone, but I hoped that would be many years away. I found myself there after the funeral, as my eyes strayed to that strange guitar again, and I wondered how I had missed the note. It was slid under the strings on the neck, and the white paper stood out like a surrender flag. I picked it up, trying not to touch the guitar, and unfolded it to see Grandpa's neat handwriting. "If you're reading this, kid, then I'm gone. The music room's yours, and I hope you'll take good care of the things in it as I did. I've had a long and happy life, kiddo, and it was made better by watching you grow into a fine man. You'll make a fantastic engineer one day, but for now, I want to talk about the music. I've been playing and singing since I could walk, but it wasn't until Azzy saw me at the Bent Spoon one night that I really got my break. I saw him watching me as I played. How could you miss him, even in a crowd? The longer he watched, the more intent on me he became, and after I was finished, he approached me with an offer. He gave me that guitar, the strange one that I sometimes play, the one that feels like rotten wood, and told me to play. He said as long as I played music with it, I'd be successful, have the kind of money that I could only dream of, and have a long and fruitful life. The trade-off, though, was twofold. Once a year at the time of my birth, I would play that song for him. If I missed a year, then the deal was off, and my life would end. The other part was that, after my death, I would come to his world and play for him for all time. You're a smart kid, like I was a smart kid. You likely realize that Azrael to everyone but me, ain't human. If you take up that guitar and play for him, you can live as I lived. You can be a star. You can live comfortably. But you'll be with him when it's all said and done. I regretted my decisions at leisure, having acted in haste in my youth, but I felt it was time to make good on my deal. I know that when I die, I won't sit at the right hand of God, as it says in those songs I've sung sometimes. I don't know what awaits me, but 75 years is a long time to walk the skin of the earth. I'm tired, kiddo. Seems like a good time to lay my burdens down. I don't know where I'm going, but I hope I don't see you there someday. Tell Melinda I love her, and watch over her until God calls her home. I won't tell you not to take up the guitar, but if you do, I feel like you should know the consequences. I love you, kiddo. Have a great life. Love, Grandpa." That was 5 years ago. Grandma passed away before I graduated college, but I became the engineer that I always wanted to be. I've got a great job. I'm seeing an amazing woman that I mean to propose to next month, and I've made my grandpa's home my own. I still sit in my grandpa's music room sometimes, though, and strum a few chords or play something we played together. The white guitar hasn't moved since I put it on the wall the day that Grandpa died, and I don't intend to ever take it down again. Sometimes, though, I get the itch to pick it up and play it, especially on my birthday at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't think it or its owner will be content with Wonderwall or House of the Rising Sun, though. No, I think it wants something older, something blacker, and I think the bargain will be for something harder to pin down than time or wealth. I may not want to, but I fear that someday I'll take up Grandpa's guitar, and the bargain will be the same as it was for him so many years ago. I fear that one day I'll trade my soul to death so he might spare me over till another year. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. Well, I think we all know what the true horror there was, and it was having to listen to me sing. I'm sorry if I ruined anyone's eardrums or anyone's inclination to hear music ever again. Let's all give a big thanks to Mr. Creepypasta for adding his voice to this show. I really appreciate it. He's half the reason that I record these at all. I can remember sitting around when I was just a tyke of 30, listening to him read his own stories, and it really helped me get in the mood for Halloween. It also helped me realize that I could write these stories myself, so if you enjoy the show, be sure to give a big thanks to Mr. Creepypasta for inspiring me. If you've been enjoying our holiday content, then why not go ahead and subscribe? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the creepy stuff we do here. If you think it's going to end with spooky season, you're sadly mistaken. Winter in general is a very creepy time, and there's far more scares to come. If you're looking for something to read this holiday season, might I recommend my latest book, Fall Frights and Autumn Chills. You can find the link below, or maybe come on down to Patreon to support me a little more monetarily. I have many tiers. The Ghostly Reader tier has been my most popular. You get a book anytime I write one, signed and on your doorstep. So, what are you waiting for? Come on down and see what all the fuss is about. Speaking of patrons, let's go ahead and thank my patrons. Thanks to Janet and Winters for being my Spooky Skeleton tier contributors. And thanks to Xaronana, Emily Coltsfoot, Martha, Marianne Schuler, Jennifer Damron, and Tyler Parker for being my Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.